What did the music do to Michael Jackson?
Man, look at it. Everything, bro. Took his childhood. Shit. That case.
Yeah.
Man, it's music. Music can be tumultuous, bro. Like, and I think that a lot of the time we so busy focusing on the music and what it gives to us, we don't ever look at bro. Look at that nigga.
Was it the music or the money and the fame? He was the most famous man on earth, probably the most famous person ever.
Yeah.
That walked the face of the earth.
For sure. And look at the nigga.
Damn.
What is good, YouTube? It's your boy 50K Clay. I am Clay Will, back tapped in with yet another video, man. Firstly, I hope y'all can excuse my audio right now. I'm lacking on a microphone, but we still trying to put out this content for y'all, still trying to serve the people. So for that, in return, I ask y'all that y'all serve me by pressing like, sharing, and subscribing. I will really appreciate that, and it helps the channel grow as well. So let's get into the topic at hand, man. Recently, Lionsgate released their Michael Jackson movie to much fan acclaim, but not so much critical acclaim. And we'll get into the reasons why. But obviously, it's doing very well at the box office. It's a smash. People are loving it. But that brings to mind some interesting questions. A lot of critics were criticizing it for its lack of depiction of the allegations that took place in the course of Michael Jackson's life. A lot of people are saying they sanitized the movie to be as acceptable and as appealable to as much people as possible. And I would have to agree with that sentiment. I feel like it skipped over a lot of portions of his life and a lot of things that would really make the character interesting, that would really flesh the character of Michael Jackson out. As it stands right now, a lot of people choose, and what a lot of people got from this movie was that Michael Jackson was just a saint and a hero, and he was a magnificent artist. One of the foremost greatest artists of all time, one of the best performers of all time. But I feel like we'd be remiss to not mention the extent of his character, to not really go into what shaped him to be this way. And I feel like a lot of the movie was lacking on that. But this is a thing that gets done to public figures all around. A lot of their history gets revised. They get painted in a positive light, especially after their death. And the studio that produced this movie, alongside Michael Jackson's estate, want to really sanitize his image. Something interesting about Michael Jackson was that he was one of the first child stars. I know we really don't consider Michael Jackson to be a child star, but if you think about it, he was. He came into the music industry around 9 or 10 years old. A lot of what's painted to be child stars are these Lindsay Lohan, Olsen twin type of figures. And it's interesting to me, somebody like Michael Jackson that grew up in the eye or the spotlight doesn't really get depicted as a child star. Maybe it was because he was so successful after he grew from childhood and wasn't like some of these other child stars who, had a string of good releases while they were young. But as they grew older, their fame started to quickly subside. It was the opposite for Michael Jackson, or he was somebody that continued to be successful even into his later years. But one of the things we talk about with child stars is the abuse they suffered at the hands of the music industry and how it shaped them to be who they are. And what's interesting about this particular child prodigy, this particular child star, is he was a product from the time he was 9 years old to the time he died. And this movie further goes along by sanitizing his image and by depicting him to be a saint instead of representing all the complexities of his character. This movie does the exact same thing that made his life such a miserable and traumatizing experience for him. He was a product then, something that was meant to be used by the masses, meant to be entertaining, meant to put on this facade that people just engage with, eat, and consume until there's nothing left of them. And that's just how I feel about this Michael Jackson movie. I know a lot of fans were loving it, but I think rightly so. Critics were particularly harsh on this movie because it didn't really do much with the subject material that they had. The fans are getting on the critics about the movie not portraying the darker side of Michael Jackson that we don't get to see. But what's interesting to me is his life wouldn't be his life without betraying that side of him. But, and this is the topic of the video, we all have biases towards our favorite artists. We don't want to admit that our favorite stars, our favorite heroes, the people that we grew up on, from music to sports to other forms of entertainment, they might have been monsters. I think America has always been wrapped up in this parasitic, parasocial consumer culture. We don't want to accept that our favorite idols or icons might be monsters, because if they're a monster and I love their music, that might be a reflection on me. People will defend these celebrities with their lives that they know absolutely nothing about, but besides what was portrayed in the public light. They spend hours debating other strangers who are more like them than this random celebrity. But because we revere these people, because we love their artistic contributions so much, we're willing to put aside all the potential facts and completely ignore them to defend somebody we don't necessarily know all that well. I recently saw on Twitter, somebody said, imagine if Jeffrey Epstein was super immensely talented and he could sing and he could dance, but he had a traumatized childhood, and to escape from it, he developed these islands where he could go to and escape. Would people have the same mercy on Jeffrey Epstein? Look, man, I think we can have a multifaceted conversation about these people. On one hand, you can acknowledge that, yes, they were a multi-talented, megastar, super talented, creative individual with limitless potential. But at the same time, there has to be room for dialogue instead of complete and utter dismissal like Michael Jackson fans are doing. That this person might have been a creep or a weirdo. If a regular civilian was doing the same things that Michael Jackson was accused of, and despite the results of the FBI investigation, they were able to just go home, would people still defend them with their lives? Or there was no evidence to corroborate these claims? Would you still be defending them even still? If they were just some random person, would you still be defending them? Ferociousness that you seem to possess for Michael Jackson. And it's not just a Michael Jackson thing. I say, look, man, let's just admit our biases. Because Michael Jackson was super talented, because he was super famous, and because he made a lot of incredible music, that doesn't dismiss the fact that these allegations, is facts to corroborate those as well. The victims of these potential abusers shouldn't just be immediately dismissed. We harp so heavy on people like Jeffrey Epstein or Donald Trump, but when it comes to somebody that we like, we're willing to dismiss all of the evidence that might substantiate the fact that these people were not somebody to be revered. These are human beings. They're complex. We don't have to necessarily have to put somebody on a pedestal because we love their music. You can love their music, but at the same time, admit there was some suspicious activity going on at the very least. But I feel like people see these stars as almost a reflection of them, as a reflection of the everyman. But in reality, these people are in a totally different stratosphere. Look at somebody like R. Kelly. There's still a wide majority of people, especially the generation that came before me, that will feel free to willingly admit that, hey, I still listen to R. Kelly's music. I'm able to separate the art from the artist. What he did was completely disgusting to me, but I still listen to his music. Because people see reflections of themselves and their favorite stars, they're completely unwilling to admit that this person might have been more flawed than we want to admit. When Kobe makes that shot over Dwayne Wade, you felt the type of way. It resonated with you. So for you to see somebody that you like be painted in such a negative light, it might be hard for you to accept Kobe was just another regular blow Joe. Would you still be so adamantly defensive of him? And that's exactly what I'm trying to get at. The heart of celebrity and fan culture, and how we become immediately defensive or dismissive of somebody else, of a star, because of because of our attachment to them, while we might be quick to While we might be quick to point the finger at somebody else if they were just a normal civilian. But because they've reached this level of icon status, we immediately become defensive and protective of somebody who we don't even know. But it's just so funny to me how everybody is so woke. Everybody is so in touch with victims and so sympathetic. But when it comes to somebody they like, they'll immediately come to their defense. The hypocrisy of society and who gets to be defended and who was actually the victim and who was actually, it was a elaborate conspiracy to undermine this person when in reality, I think two things can be true at once. We've lost all sense of objectivity. And I was watching an interview with Charlemagne, the guy from Breakfast Club, and Vince Staples, and
look, man, that's all I'm saying. I'm saying the nigga looked like he was into some freaky shit, man. We talked about
no, man. Mike was innocent, man.
I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm not saying he was. I'm saying that if he had anything going on, I wouldn't be surprised. All I'm saying is the nigga life looked a little rough.
Charlemagne was saying all that he had done for the music industry, all the rights that he owned and whatnot. And Vince said something that resonated with me is how quickly we deflect with people's accomplishments. We completely write off whatever they might have done simply because they accomplished a lot.
He got investigated by the FBI for 17 years.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about that wig, bro. You talking about these kids. I'm saying regardless, see how we trying to sidetrack it with the accomplishments instead of being like they fucked this nigga life up.
In reality, those people that have the most power and have the most status quo and cultural cachet, they might be more privy to use their status as a way to deflect from being accused of something like this. And I think that's just a really interesting thing about how society claims to be so woke, so in touch. But as soon as somebody they like might be accused of something, then it's immediate deflection. This person was a saint. How dare you accuse them of this type of thing? When in reality, I think that we should all learn to be more objective. It hurts to admit that your idol or somebody that you revere in the culture might have done some messed up things. But it's up to you, the consumer, to decide whether you are gonna separate the art from the artist. And it doesn't mean dismissing hundreds of victims' claims. Ultimately, man, I think Kendrick Lamar said it best. When shit hits the fan, are you still a fan? And even in that song, he talked about Michael Jackson. But it's an interesting question posed. Because in it, Kendrick is saying, if I'm accused of these type of things one day, are you still going to be a loyal fan? Are you still going to ride beside me? Or are you going to completely write me off? And what are the qualifications to being completely written off? How do you decide who's written off and whose testimonies are true? Does it just depend on who made the better art? Who was more influential? These are multi-layered conversations that I'll be glad to engage with anybody in the comments about. But in the meantime, I want to thank y'all so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'm out.